Get ready for your reality to be shattered. This crazy chronicle dives deep into the darkest abysses of history in search of nausea-inducing facts buried by the censors. The revelations you're about to experience are hazmat gear-level disturbing. You've been warned. 1. Rwandan Genocide. During the course of 100 days in 1994, an estimated 800,000 Tutsis were killed by ethnic Hutus in Rwanda. This genocide is a stark reminder of the corrosive effects of hatred and division to way bleaker reality. Ultra-conservatives that still prevail among some patriarchal cultures today include disturbingly draconian codes that explicitly exile menstruating women to fend for themselves in nomadic rural tent cities. These period banishments are not even merely solitary camp retreats, but as full economic exile into unsanitary isolated zones, oftentimes swarming. 3. Nanking Massacre. When Japanese troops invaded the Chinese city of Nanking in 1937, they went on to commit one of the greatest war crimes in history. Hundreds of thousands of civilians and indolent soldiers were massacred, countless women sexually violated. 4. Unit 731. It was Unit 731, an undercover Japanese Army biological and chemical warfare unit during World War II. The human experiments were barbaric, inhumane, and resulted in numerous deaths and suffering. 5. Trail of Tears. The U.S. government in the 1830s forcibly removed thousands of Indian people from their homelands as part of the infamous Trail of Tears. Many perished of disease, exposure, and starvation on the brutal journey. 6. Cambodian Genocide. From 1975 to 1979, the Khmer Rouge regime, under Pol Pot's leadership, murdered roughly 2 million Cambodians, almost a quarter of the population, in a savage effort to build a classless agrarian society. 7. Armenian Genocide. Between 1915 and 1923, the Ottoman Empire carried out a systematic extermination of 1.5 million Armenians. This genocide is generally ignored, yet still a big and sad historical event. 8. Tuskegee Syphilis Study. The Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment was a U.S. Public Health Service clinical study that spanned 40 years, from 1932 to 1972, which studied untreated syphilis in African American men without their informed consent. This nefarious study ripped through the lives of those involved and the lives of their families, with consequences that are still felt today. 9. Chornobyl Disaster. When a nuclear accident in Chornobyl, Ukraine, went catastrophically wrong in 1986, millions of people were exposed to lethal radiation. The long-term health effects and environmental degradation are still with us today. 10. Jonestown Massacre. In 1978, more than 900 members of the People's Temple cult died in a mass suicide murder at Jonestown, Guyana. We must teach our children caution when it comes to extreme cult-like behavior and blind obedience. 11. Holocaust mass grave. Found under a children's playground. In 2011, amateur Jewish historians got more than they expected when they began investigating a Ukrainian kid's park. The decomposed remains of hundreds and hundreds of Nazi genocide victims were found underneath the swings and slides by radar scans. Most belonged to vulnerable women and children who met their deaths in mobile gas chambers. Decades later, their final resting place had become the palatial grounds of choice for joyful youngsters, a cruel example of life's caprices. 12. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The 1945 atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed an estimated 200,000 people, most of them civilians. These bombings ended World War II and deep scars. 13. Great Chinese Famine. Guided by political strategies and Mother Nature from 1959 to 1961, the Great Chinese Famine occurred. Between 15 and 45 million people died from starvation and malnutrition. 14. My Lai Massacre. American soldiers slaughtered hundreds of Vietnamese civilians in the My Lai Massacre of 1968 during the Vietnam War. The event shocked the world and highlighted the war's brutality. 15. Stalin's purges. In the Soviet Union, the purges under Joseph Stalin's regime resulted in an estimated 1 million people killed. He eliminated perceived threats to his power through political repression and forced labor camps. Political repression and forced labor camps were used to eliminate perceived threats to his power. 16. Holodomor. The Holodomor was the man-made famine that engulfed Soviet Ukraine from 1932 until 1933 due to the policies of Joseph Stalin. Millions starved to death in what is now regarded as a genocide. 17. Bataan Death March. In 1942, thousands of Filipino and American prisoners of war were also forced to march at the hands of the Japanese army under horrific conditions. Thousands died on the Bataan Death March from exposure, disease, and abuse. 18. Civilian injuries of the Vietnam War. Vietnamese civilians suffered immense hardship and loss of life in the Vietnam War. Millions were killed, and millions more were forced from their homes. 19. Atlantic slave trade. The Atlantic slave trade transported more than 12 million Africans across the ocean through force, brutal conditions, and inhumane treatment of the individuals. The repercussions of such barbarity are inherited by societies today. 20. Salem Witch Trials. In 1692, hysteria in Massachusetts resulted in the execution of 20 people accused of witchcraft. The Salem Witch Trials stand as a dark example of the perils of mass hysteria and scapegoating. And there you have it, 20 historical things that will make you feel uneasy. The past doesn't always look rosy, but these events are important to remember so that we can understand our world and help build a better one. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more on this subject.